You're listening to another ambitious Entrepreneur Network.com podcast, the voice for entrepreneurs and small business. Now, onto the show.
Welcome to Business Women Australia podcast, the podcast for ambitious women who are serious about business success and leadership development, keen to increase their knowledge and skills.
So welcome to another episode of the Business Women Australia podcast. Yes, I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cross, also known as the Podcasting Queen. Now, my guest today says technology is all about experiences. As women lead their employees and organisations through digital transformation journeys, they should harness their natural abilities to connect, to empathise and convey emotion to better drive these experiences. Joining me on today's show is Kerrie-Anne Turner. Now, Kerrie-Anne, she is a passionate leader with 25 years of experience in the information sector. Now, over this time, she's witnessed the evolution of the dynamic tech industry from the front line and has seen how technology can be used as a force for good. Now, as the head of New Zealand commercial business and channels at VMware ANZ, Kerrie-Anne works with businesses to reposition them for success, using technology as the catalyst for positive change. She's also the global leader of Women at VMware POD, and she's passionate about starting conversations and encouraging action around gender balance and equality. Now, on today's show, Kerrie-Anne is going to share practical ways to get involved in and navigate the new future that's taking shape. She's also going to speak about the power of saying yes, especially for ambitious business-minded women, and how to reframe the way that you think about certain qualities, such as being in touch with your emotions, having empathy, and seeking connection in a business environment, and so much more, I'm sure. Welcome to the show, Kerrie-Anne.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today.
As we said in the introduction, you've got 25 years of experience in the information technology sector. And so often when I speak to women business owners, many who'll be watching and listening today, as well as the recording, you've got two camps. You've got one camp who, yeah, that's fine, technology, and others that go, oh my goodness, tech, it just drives me insane. So I'm wondering, 25 years ago, was it something that you've always enjoyed, tech, and been interested in, or what was the path that kind of navigated you to become involved in the IT industry?
Well, look, that's a great story. Anne-Marie, often I say I was engaged in technology before technology was cool. And it's no secret that I accidentally fell into the world of technology. I finished my HSC. I knew I actually wanted to go to university, but I knew I wasn't ready to go straight out of school. And so I set about getting a job and was combing the classified ads for a job. And I remember Mum sitting at the kitchen table asking me what I wanted to do. And I said, you know, Mum, I don't know what I want to do, but I know what I don't want to do. I don't want to have anything to do with those computer things. And lo and behold, one of the first ads I came across was for a technology distributor, and it was doing customer service and tech support. And I went for the job, got it, and fell in love. 25, almost 30 years later, I'm still in technology.
Wow. Isn't that interesting that you think of something and you think, no, don't want to do that. And all of a sudden you realize that, hey, I'm actually enjoying that. And I'd imagine that that is something that really drives you to continue to share your message, which you'll do today, because how many women in business, they try and stay away from tech because, oh, I can't understand that. But in actual fact, if it takes the time to explain just what is possible, all of a sudden they recognize how they can leverage that. Now, I know you want to talk about practical ways to get involved in and navigate the new future that's taking shape. Have you seen some significant changes happening, even I would imagine in the last year, let alone over the last decade or so?
Well, I think if you'd asked me this question a year ago, my response would have been very different. I think we as a country, as small business, medium and large business leaders, we've had no choice but to embrace technology because we needed to. We needed to get our employees safe. We needed to get our people connected. We needed to deliver telehealth. you know what, we needed to connect with our loved ones. We needed to talk to Nana when we couldn't physically see her in the nursing home. And so I've absolutely seen that embrace. We've talked about people embracing technology or digital, doing 10 years worth of digital transformation in 2 weeks. We've seen corporations, we've seen small business owners absolutely step back and embrace the concept of technology. My challenge and my ask is, don't go back. You think about the new normal and step back and think about that innovation. And actually today, would you believe, the Shadow Minister for Innovation, Technology and the Future of Work, Claire O'Neill, was speaking at the National Press Club. And she talked about the fact that we'd been quite residents as a nation and a series of business leaders to embrace technology, and we've lost our way a little bit with innovation. So that's my challenge. That's my ask. Embrace it.
Yeah, and I can't remember the resource that I read this, but it was somewhere overseas that they said that the change that has had to be made to embrace this online and technology, what normally may have taken 6 years has been condensed in a short amount of time. And as you say, why go back? Why go back? And in actual fact, I mean, normal, what do you define as normal? There are so many more people now online. And, let's talk about some of the benefits, some of the things that you've seen that have occurred because people are now embracing technology.
I think if you're building and leading businesses at the moment, one of the key things for me as a result of embracing technology is the evolution of work. Imagine thinking about the access to talent we can now tap into. Think about the access to women, for example, we can bring back into the workforce. We know the pandemic has hit women the hardest economically, and that's typically because they actually have the majority of representation in jobs that have been mostly affected by the pandemic. We also know that they tend to leave the workforce to raise children, etc. So imagine if we could embrace the future, leveraging technology and thinking about where we look for talent. Imagine tapping into someone in Perth or Adelaide or Tasmania for a job in Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane. And, maybe we'd never thought about that before because we really didn't think it was possible to do that work from that location. Well, technology enables that, but it also gives us a chance to break down some long-held stereotypes and also breaks down some of those barriers about attracting women back into the workforce, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, and when you're talking about that, I'm reminded of a term and a phrase that now is being discussed. And they're talking about like a hybrid work environment where there's a blend of being in the office and being at home. And as we know, as you say, being able to tap into a workforce that primarily may not have been able to, on a long-term basis, be at a workplace. This, as you say, enables them to tap into that, to be able to work from home. And I think what we've proven is you can actually work from home, be just as productive using technology, yes?
Look, absolutely. And I think there's no question we've busted that myth that it wasn't possible. But I'd also challenge everyone on the podcast today to think about your own leadership development in the new world. So just because someone is remote doesn't mean how you lead them and how you get them to deliver for your business and grow their business and help them on their development journey will be the same. So I think there's a huge opportunity for business leaders and particularly women in business to bring in some of those skills that we might, I guess for want of a better word, spend a lifetime downplaying as perhaps something we shouldn't show in the workforce. Those high EQ levels, those huge levels of empathy, huge levels of compassion, they become skills that I think will be the new currency.
Yes. And it's interesting that you should say that because I know a lot of leaders and change makers who I have interviewed that now run workshops and coaching programs to help their team to become more empathetic, to become more passionate. Because, and here's, I'd love you to speak into this. And I know that you were going to talk about the power of, yes, for women in business, ambitious women in business. But I think, when we're looking at technology and the fact that we aren't in the same room, we need to then use some of those skills to be able to build rapport before that you may not necessarily, well, you probably won't have because of the screen. And if we're talking to a potential customer or an existing customer or our team, it's important that this comes through. What kind of tips and insights would you just have, just reflecting on that? What are some of the differences that people need to be aware of when they are now spending more time on the screen and navigating staff, customers, key stakeholders? What are some things that we need to know?
I think COVID's been a great leveler. And I think it's okay to what I know has been labelled as being absolutely human. I think those human qualities around leadership are the things we tend to bury because we've had years of either coaching or, I guess, what I'll call outdated rhetoric around what a leader should or shouldn't be. So I think we also have an opportunity to break down some of those stereotypes and know that, and again, it was an article that was in the Australian today. Outgoing CEO of Swimming Australia, Lee Russell, talked about moving on and ultimately being exhausted, not exhausted from the job, but exhausted around battling a mindset that as a woman is probably so entrenched that it's entirely taken for granted around that inclusive mindset. So I think there's a huge opportunity for us to, again, break down some of those barriers, start to talk and embrace those skills that make us absolutely human, gender aside, but also tend to be those qualities we associate with women, or we call them feminine qualities. There's a place in this world for an inclusive set of leadership skills that come from both men and women. And I think that's our opportunity. You can sit down with someone and have a great conversation, particularly if they've got an alternate point of view to yours. That is the opportunity that's ahead of us.
Yes. And, we hear across, different platforms that because of what's happened and because of uncertainty and everything, it's caused a lot more of people to experience mental health issues. I think businesses and even individuals to be able to be mindful of that, but as leaders of our business, to create the kind of environments that creates a safe space for people, and to what do we need to do it, because as we know now, change is so quick, and it's almost difficult to keep up in some instances. And so how do we navigate that? Are there some things that you've seen done that's been done really well that you would say, if an organization can do this, they're positioning their team, their business in good stead? What are some insights you can share around here?
Well, without sounding flippant, change is good, you go first. That tends to be our first reaction when we think about change. But if this year's taught us anything, it's taught us that we are more resilient than we think. I think in terms of evolving your organisation or bringing your business forward, a couple of key tips. Embrace the change, and embrace change, but embrace change with a strategic mindset and a growth mindset. Those two things are really important. At least know where you're heading to, know where you want to take the business to. I think thinking about your talent, where it comes from, what you're looking for, being open to the notion of the flexibility and the access of that talent is far more broad reaching than we've ever thought before. And the use of technology to connect with your customers and your people are key innovation opportunities. You might not have thought about expanding or growing your business. You might have thought, a year ago, Idea X was not possible. Reframe that. Think about that opportunity, that idea, and reframe it in the context of, what if I could get access to some great talent I couldn't in the past? What if I was to do a little more research to see what technology platforms were available for me to think about how I digitally nurture and digitally connect with my customers? And just reframe your thinking.
So important. And let's talk about then the power of saying yes, especially for ambitious, business-minded women. Is the reason why, or one of the reasons why you're wanting to bring this up, is because you see that in some instances, women, we're not saying yes?
Well, it's both though. Yes and no, at the fear of using no in the concept of saying yes. For me, early on in my career, I was hesitant. I was hesitant at saying yes to something before I had 100% of the skill set. And as I got a little more comfortable with that fairly early on, I was either foolish, naive, or really, really clever at putting my hand up for things to say, and opportunities. I had the opportunity to live and work overseas when I was just 27 years old. I put my hand up to, set up a business for the technology company I was running in Southeast Asia. While I was up there, I landed the opportunity to open our India office at, a year later. I had zero experience in opening a brand new country, let alone a country that wasn't, that I wasn't a native of. But, saying yes to those opportunities are some of the most incredible experiences in my life. But conversely, knowing when to say yes. On my LinkedIn profile, I wrote an article, actually, it's up there on my LinkedIn profile, around the power of saying yes and some of the challenges when we do say yes or feel pressured to say yes because we have to keep going. We feel this enormous pressure, I think, as women in business to do it all, be a superhero. Let me tell you, the cape is completely optional. And I said yes to something that I should have said no to. I was going to do an important business pitch on the other side of the world in London, and I just suffered, I'd suffered a loss. I'd, had quite a personal loss. And I still got on the plane and I still delivered that pitch, and I failed. I failed at it. And it took me a long time to recover from that. But looking back with wisdom and age, I said yes at the wrong time. But I also said yes to post that, actually going back quite introspectively and thinking about why I did what I did and how would I take that going forward for, a better outcome next time.
Yeah, that's a wonderful insights that you were able to glean from that. Because I know as women, often in our work, it's not just work we're doing. I mean, it's part of who we are, especially if we're in service-based businesses helping customers. I mean, product-based businesses as well. What are some of the insights that you want to share about that learning? Because sometimes, yes, as women, we don't want to say no. We want to be liked by everyone in the organisation. But that does not always serve us. And ultimately, as what you've identified, it doesn't ultimately serve the outcome either. So what are some insights that you can share that you learned that that you can impart with others that may have gone through a similar experience?
I think my biggest learning was not being afraid to have the conversation with the leadership team at the time about what I was going through, and that I needed some time, and that doing this pitch wasn't right for me right now, and looking at alternatives. In hindsight, what's the worst that could have happened? I would have got an opportunity to repitch for the job at a later date when I was in the frame of mind to be able to be successful with it. Somebody else could have done the pitch for me if it was a customer pitch, for example. And I think, so that's my biggest learning. I think when that occurred, which is well over 10 years ago now, I think the inclusive nature of the organisations that we were in at the time probably weren't as welcoming. You really did feel like you really couldn't bring your whole self to work. You were, again, meant to downplay those what we describe as traditionally feminine traits. And you were encouraged to be one of the boys, particularly in the tech sector. So therefore, having a vulnerability in the way that I did was, in my own view, going to set me back in terms of, compared to my male colleagues in terms of the development of my career. So I think it's changed significantly in a lot of industries, including the tech industry, even just in the last 10 years. And having the courage to talk about it actually paves the way for others. And I've started to talk about the idea of possibility models, not role models anymore, possibility models. Just imagine if I'd had the courage to have that conversation 10 years ago, what kind of possibility model would I have been for the women in my organisation at the time?
Yes. And you know what? I think sometimes being courageous enough to have that conversation I mean, who knows? Maybe they would have said, oh, absolutely. Sometimes what we can do is the fear, or we build this thing up to the point where actually it would never have happened. And as you said, times have changed. And I would imagine that a lot more people, even men now, are recognizing that, you know what, even though they may not have the level of EQ as perhaps some women, they have emotions too. And guess what? You can't separate them, because we want the whole person to come to the workplace. That beautifully segues us into, how to reframe the way that we think about certain qualities, because I think what you beautifully said, how about we become possibility models? We can only do that if we have the mindset to say, you know what, these qualities are actually part of what makes me unique, and why I do such a great job, and what I bring to the organization. So let's talk about what are some ways to reframe the way we think.
Well, one thing I've done to reframe the way I think, and we spoke about this just as we were backstage, Anne-Marie, you and I share a common trait. We both are highly introverted, and most people looking at us or listening to this podcast will be kind of scratching their head going, we don't quite get that. All that means is that you and I get our energy from us to recharge. We don't get our energy from large groups or other people. And so I now see that I've reframed that as a strength, because it allows me to be thoughtful, introspective. It allows me to really think through some of those tough things I have to think through, either leading teams or creating that next business opportunity, or guiding an organization through a challenge or tough time, which many of us, in fact all of us, have just been through with COVID. So I think that is one thing that I've been able to do, is reframe what might have been perceived as a weakness into a strength. And also the notion that empathy, compassion, and kindness are somehow vulnerabilities. They are simply not. They allow you to take a different look at the problem, and they allow you to think differently. What you also have to do is, I'm acutely aware of where my gaps are, where where things are that I necessarily might have a blind spot for, or aren't necessarily my strength. And I've made an entire career out of, surrounding myself with incredible people who are way more smarter than I am, and ultimately create their success as well. But I tend to think about them in the concept of where are my gaps, and how are we collectively more stronger? And I think we, as we head into 2021, we need to look at how we show up as women, and those traditionally feminine traits are in fact your strength. And, put the cape on, because, you have the opportunity to be a possibility model. You really do.
Yeah. I mean, as you're sharing those qualities, especially empathy, seeking connection, those sorts of things, when we're looking about, well, what constitutes and builds trust? I mean, how can you build trust if you're not trusted? If someone doesn't believe that you understand them, that you have a grasp of their need? I mean, I don't know. In fact, I don't even know how someone could be in business if they don't have, empathy, and even, just the ability to have a bit of compassion. Because how often do we hear customers who have complained and maybe left our business? Well, what went wrong? I wasn't listened to. You just weren't listening to me. Well, guess what? That requires the ability to listen, show empathy, even if you may not agree with that customer. But if you're not going to build that rapport, which requires those key skills, there goes that business relationship. Have you seen that starting to play out in the workforce as well? I'm sure you have.
Well, indeed, Anne-Marie, and there is two sides to the one coin, the same coin. The first is the notion of empathy, but the flip side to that coin is authenticity. And the really positive news is empathy is a teachable skill. It really is. And, some of us do it better than others, just like, my son at 14 is a better skier than I am. No surprise there, but it's something we can learn, and it is something we can teach, and it's something we can practice and hone and craft. And I think, however, your customers, your team members, your leadership team, they'll work out pretty quickly if there's no authenticity with that empathy. And that's a really important two set of characteristics to think about. And some of the things I do whenever I've stepped into leading new teams or building new businesses to help build that trust that you spoke about, I ask 3 questions. I step in and say, what do you and I meet with everybody in the business. I don't care what job you do. I sit down and spend 10 or 15 or 20 minutes with everybody in the business. And I ask 3 questions. I ask, what are you concerned I will do? What are you concerned I won't do? And what's your single piece of advice for me in the first 30 days? And then I close the conversation off by saying, I'm going to ask for something that I haven't earned yet, which is your trust. And then you go about delivering for those individuals and for that business. Asking those simple questions, what are you concerned I will do? What are you concerned I won't do? Really actually gets people to open up a little bit, because naturally when you step into leading a business, and you can ask this at any time in a business, you don't have to be new to the business, people genuinely see that you are connected, you really want to know, you have that empathy, but you ask those questions with a level of authenticity. Then how you demonstrate that authenticity is you act on what you hear and you deliver for that organisation and for those individuals.
Yeah, I love those questions. And as you're sharing those, Kerrie-Anne, I'm reminded of a conversation I had with a gentleman in the UK not so long ago. And one of the things that he started to roll out, so team-wide, men and women, was having a bit of a round table meeting as the team and asking them something along the lines of, what are 3 significant events that happened to you that you believed have shaped you to become the person that you are now? And he said some of the stories that they shared, even the men, were just so, the whole team instantly built this level of empathy and caring for them, because when they gave the backstory, people could see, oh, is that why that person is so protective, or things like that. This is what we're talking about when we are authentic, when we have these transparent conversations. And this particular consultant noticed a difference, because he didn't always do that. As he started to do that, the team was far more united. They worked together. They were understanding all of the qualities that you just mentioned, the men as well as the women, and united. And I think, who doesn't want a workforce and a team that operates like that?
Absolutely. You made me think, Anne-Marie, of something that Simon Sinek talks about. Obviously, he talks about why and a whole raft of things, but he talks about showing up with empathy and compassion in the workforce. And he talks about 2 examples of, and I get to lead a sales organisation, is one of the things I have done over the years in my technology career. And, if you've got, an individual who might be off their number, they haven't hit their target, you haven't delivered the revenue you wanted, imagine reframing the conversation instead of saying, I am, and this is Simon Sinek, there's many examples of this on his YouTube channels and so forth. And his speaking opportunities. Imagine walking into that, that individual and saying, well, you're off your numbers. If you don't improve, I don't know if I'm really going to be able to protect you. Imagine walking into that conversation by saying, hey, I've noticed you're off your numbers. And are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help? That's a very different set of conversations, a very different set of outcomes that come out, because someone will be going through something that you may not be aware of, or alternatively, they may need help and haven't been able to ask for that help. So I love the way he reframes that.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. And you know what, as you're sharing that, I'm reminded of something my daughter once said. She said when she was driving in a car and her partner was there and he would, point out, don't do this, don't do that. It was like this classical condition, as we know, with Pavlov's dogs. And it might go with me here. I mean, there is a point, there is a correlation to that. And it's almost like how you respond to the team will either have them kind of cringe, go into that condition. Oh, no, they're going to, let's talk about it. Because I think when we do it the way that you reflected back, it allows for that brainstorming, the support and growth opportunity. Whereas in the other scenario, people kind of shut down, they go on their defensive, and nothing really turns out positively, does it, when people are kind of in the conflict, in the defensive? So great example there. So before we Like finalise, I know we can talk for hours, Kerrie-Anne, but we are coming closely to the end of the show. What are some of the things that VMware is excited about? What are some things that, moving forward in 2021, you hope to see more of in organisations as far as the tech is concerned to really help them navigate into 2021 far better, far more efficiently, and of course, as we said, embracing more of the teams that have equity, gender balance and equity, and equality. What sort of things are you looking forward to moving forward?
I think, and again, in that same article that I mentioned this morning, I think it was in the Australian actually, Lee Russell talking about, COVID is really an invitation to reimagine the future. And I think we don't lose the ability to reimagine the future. Don't lose the ability to think about how I transform my business with technology. What do I need to do? And make that investment. It's just like investing in you. We talk about, our LinkedIn profiles, for example, from a business perspective, or our social media pages, spending a little bit of time to invest in you. We often put that on the back burner. Well, spending a little bit of time to invest in your business, particularly the platform that you're going to use to build your business for growth, you need to do that now. Now is the opportunity to do that. It's going to allow you to reach and acquire and talk to more customers. And it's actually going to allow you to create a platform where you can attract great talent and people want to come and work for you. So I think that's the opportunity ahead of us. I'm also really looking forward to 2020 being a kind year. I'm reading Human Kindness at the moment, Humankind, which is a really cool book on ultimately believing in humanity. And I think as we come out of, 2020 and we come out of a challenging year, I am super excited to see, what 2021 holds, and know that we've got to come back stronger. We've got an opportunity to rebuild our economies. We've got opportunities to invest and create that entrepreneurial spirit and invest in innovation, invest in some of those innovative ideas that we've probably shied away from for one reason or another. We've got opportunities to invest in great talent where we might have shied away from doing that in the past. I think that is the opportunity that presents us.
Yeah, I love that, Kerrie-Anne. And how can people find out about you, more connect? How should they find out about VMware ANZ?
Well, you can connect with me on Kerrie-Anne Turner. Just search for Kerrie-Anne Turner on LinkedIn. I'm also, my Twitter handle is Kerrie-Anne T, KerrieAnnet. Connect with me on Twitter, connect with me on LinkedIn, and of course, I know we're live streaming on the Facebook platform as well. So I'm pretty easy to find. So I'd love to have a chat.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your insights and wisdom. And I love how you said, be a possibility model.
Possibility models.
Yeah, you certainly have been today. And as we said, don't let technology be a barrier. Don't let not being able to say yes or not yet. Yes, but not yet. Don't let that be a barrier either. So thanks once again for coming on the show, Kerrie-Anne.
Anne-Marie, it's been a great pleasure. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for having me.